Well, another day, another unarmed black man shot by a cop. In this case, it was Romaine Brisbane. He was delivering fast food to his kids when a police officer pulled up to his car. And there is a narrative of this which may arguably make this justified somehow, in as much as apparently he ran away from the police officer, and the police officer got in a scuffle with him and thought that the pill bottle that he was apparently protecting in his pocket, I would guess, because he wasn't supposed to have it, but I don't know. I don't know what the situation is. But anyhow, the cop thought this was a gun, and so he shot him. But still, that said, I mean, is this always the first thing we go to? Is this anyway? It's continuing, right? It's continuing, and protests are continuing all over the country about the Garner case, about Michael Brown's case, Eric Garner's case, and others. So, keep your eye on this. One of the reasons why I want to talk about Chile, the country, and the reason why I started out with white cops killing black young men, is because that has led to a series of demonstrations, of protests. Now, let me throw this into the context of South America and history, which I find just absolutely fascinating. Robert Hunsiker has written a great piece on this. It's called Chile's Neoliberal Flip-Flop. It's over at Dissident Voices, dissidentvoice.org, excuse me. And he points out that back in the day, 1974, to be specific, this was the tail end. It actually started with a coup d'etat in 1973, the last year of the Nixon presidency, when Henry Kissinger was in the White House. And Salvador Allende was, overthrown and murdered, and the people of Chile got General Augusto Pinochet, along with a bunch of economists from the University of Chicago. They called them the Chicago Boys. They were all disciples of Milton Friedman. And they were preaching what today you would refer to as Paul Ryan economics, libertarian economics, conservative economics, Tea Party economics, Republican economics. Any of those categories probably fall into this. The way that economists refer to it and Europeans refer to it is neoliberal economics. That's confusing to a lot of Americans who think that, neo means new. Is this the new liberal? No, it's not. It's, in Europe, they refer to conservatives as liberals. Seriously. I mean, economically. Because what they would say that conservatives are doing is make the rules more liberal for the corporations and the rich people. Get this? So it's kind of confusing. But in any case, in 73, they had never successfully flipped a country from being relatively democratic socialist, sort of like the United States. You've got a good social safety net. You've got, or at least a social safety net with minimum wage and the health insurance for very poor people, housing and food support for very poor people, retirement, the Social Security, a third of Social Security providing for widows, orphans, and disabled people. So basically, you got a social safety net. Milton Friedman's idea was do away with all of that and don't replace it with anything coming from government. Just stand back. And what will happen is corporations and the magic of the so-called free market will just create it all. It will create a paradise. Now, this is a stupid idea. It is a fantasy. Ayn Rand pitched it in her book Atlas Shrugged, and others, The Fountainhead and others. Paul Ryan has been pitching it every year in his budgets. It has never successfully been tried in any country in the history of Earth. There have been two high-profile attempts in my lifetime. One was in Chile, the one I'm telling you about, and the second one was in Iraq. And most Americans don't even know this. This was like a one-page story back, back in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq and they were looting the national museums and the banks and everything else, and because Paul Wolfowitz and L. Paul Bremer had, not Paul Wolfowitz, Secretary of Defense. Who was the Secretary of Defense? Don Rumsfeld. Thank you, Jim. Don Rumsfeld and L. Paul Bremer, at the behest of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, but I think that they really were taking it a step further, said, hey, now we've got this country that was very socialist, right? The Ba'athist Party is a socialist party. It was called the Ba'athist Socialist Party. And so they said, we're going to fire everybody who's a member of the Socialist Party, which meant every member of the military, because you had to be a Ba'ath Party member to be in the military in Iraq, virtually everybody who worked in any government industry or business. And by the way, government businesses were more than half of the GDP of Iraq at that time. Okay, if you want the measure of socialism, for example, the average state in the United States probably has around 12, 13, 14% of their GDP being state spending. Mississippi is up over 20%, the most socialist state in the United States. The poor states tend to be the most socialist. Alaska is number 2. But anyhow, Iraq was 50%. And so he said, we're just going to rip all that out. Fire 500,000 men out of the military, close down these state-run industries that are making steel and that are producing electricity and that are cleaning the water and the sewage and all that. We shut them all down. Privatize it all, sell it all off or give it away, and wait for the billionaires to come in and make it all wonderful. Well, take a look at Iraq. You can see how well that worked. So in Chile, and that was version 2. The first one was in Chile. It was in 1973, really 74. Pinochet is running the place. If you want to see a movie about this, check out the movie Missing. It was made in 1982. It was taken off the market for a while. The right-wingers really didn't like this movie. It's back. I'm guessing you can find it on Amazon or Netflix or something, but it's called Missing. And it's based on a real story. This is Pinochet's cold-blooded massacre, basically, of people. So what happened was Milton Friedman and his Chicago boys got together with the people of Chile, or with the new president of Chile, the dictator, Pinochet, who was actively murdering the opposition. And they said, okay, that's it. We're going to privatize Social Security. We're going to start private schools. We're going to privatize the schools, school voucher programs. We're going to privatize the healthcare system, voucher programs. We're going to get the government out of all these areas, and we're going to invite the billionaires in. And, it was a disaster. It was an absolute flaming, screaming disaster. And now Michelle Bachelet has been reelected, the National Congress. They've got this new majority. It's called Nueva Mayoría. It's a center-left coalition made up of Bachelet's Socialist Party, the Christian Democratic Party, and the Party for Democracy. And they're running this thing. They raised corporate taxes from 20 to 25%. They closed tax loopholes on companies and business owners. They are providing money for free education for all Chileans as of 2020. It's going to ramp up to that. They're improving their healthcare system. They're rolling back the for-profit schools from Pinochet. They're doing all this stuff. Why? Because students started demonstrating in the streets. This is this blog over at Dissident Voice, Robert Hunziker article. He said, it's all about student debt. In 2011, students in Chile made headlines by launching nationwide strikes over high tuition costs that drove their families into debt. That strike lasted for 8 months. Over time, the student marches gained recognition by other like-minded organizations like trade unions and protests of environmental degradation. And basically, they formed a coalition and they rebooted Chile. We can do that here. And I see these protests against police violence as a tip of the spear for this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I would love to see a movement to eliminate student loan debt merging or joining with the people who are saying enough with the racism already, and let's build a national movement.